Lena Headey I wanted a better death for Cersei. Lena Headey has been an actor for the better part of 3 decades, but the experience has not eased the doubt she has in her abilities. And even near no, it makes me doubt myself more, she says, when we meet in her apartment-like suite at the Soho house in Berlin. Because you think that Headey, who speaks a kind of metropolitan RP spiced up with Yorkshire vowels, Cockney glottal stops and Californian grammar, swears liberally and enthusiastically. With her prominent nor is she making a play for sympathy or approbation. What she means is that you have to push away the voice that goes, "You're fucking shit, mate," she says, laughing, which is really hard some days. Clive James described Headey's Cersei as a beautiful expression of arbitrary terror, combining shapely grace with limitless evil in just the right measure to scare a man to death while rendering him helpless with desire. He wasn't lying. Watching her in Game Gallery, a definitive ranking of the Game of Thrones characters, based on who would made the best ruler of Westeros Insider. At its best, the show managed to transcend the blushing fact that it contained fire-breathing dragons and armies of demented zombies. And it was most off, by common agreement, it was at its worst in the final series, which managed to be both torturously slow and narratively rushed. Aside from the clump, but as the denouement approached, the leads were called upon to drive the drama and, like the script, were not quite up to the job. When I outline this, no, listen, she says, I invested as a viewer and I have my favorite characters. And I've got a few of Benioff and Weiss are the 2 showrunners who adapted and made one of the world's most popular TV series. What will she say when she has that drink? I will say I wanted a better death. In the penultimate episode, Cersei was crushed by falling masonry along with her brother lover Jaime Nicholas Coster-Waldau. It was an well, obviously, you dream of your death, she says. You could go in any way. Following the anticlimactic finale, reports emerged of actors experiencing a difficult aftermath. Kit Harington, she's still in touch with many of what she calls the Throners. We're all on a giant WhatsApp group, which is a daily pile-on, she says. It's hilarious, but as for a come-down, it's not happened. It was amazing, she says, with cheery pragmatism. And things end, and given that the show turned Headey from a low-profile supporting actor into a global star, it's rather a large 9-year commitment to move on from. But she's now in pictures this week's celebrity fashion hits and misses photos. When I was much younger, I would weep every time I ended a job, she says, and I would take every Vodafone phone number, every single person I'd ever said hello to, because it had been such an intense experience. And then you get older. Headey has 2 children, a 9-year-old boy from a marriage that ended in 2011 and a 3-year-old girl with filmmaker Dan Cadden, from whom she is now separated. It's said that that's hardly an unusual circumstance in the film business, but in their case they were both cast in Game of Thrones and, according to rumors coming from the set, such was the enmity that they had to be kept apart. During the course of she now lives in East Dulwich in South London, after a short stint in her native Yorkshire, following 12 years in Los Angeles. Having made her debut as a 17-year-old in the film Waterland, Headey carved out a busy but not particularly notable career in the UK and then America. With her striking look, perhaps her real breakthrough came in television, playing Sarah Connor in Terminator: The Sarah Connor Chronicles. The short-lived series, we were doing this little indie in LA called Pete Smalls is Dead, she recalls. And we were all used to projects with brief shelf lives. She thought she'd go to Scotland and have a laugh for a month. A decade later, sometimes when you're on the tube and suddenly someone nudges somebody else, she says. I panic in those. You still travel by tube? I ask with surprise. Apparently she does. The quid pro quo, so using it in ways that are helpful and supportive to others. It sounds naff, but it's genuine. That's the balance for me, she says. Recently, she's been using her voice to bring attention to the plight of migrants. Like many people, it's a concern that also led to her appearing in AL, which was made by 3 people who had worked as volunteers at the Calais Jungle. Director Anthony Woodley, writer Helen Kingston, and producer Luke Healy. The filmmakers wanted to open up a dialogue around the refugee/migrant debate that acknowledged the complexity and emotions on both sides of the issue. Headey plays it's an understated performance, delivered in flat Yorkshire tones, a portrait of an emotionally vulnerable woman hiding under a harsh exterior. After rejecting, Headey was attracted to the change in scale. "I sort of grew up in the small British film industry," she says, back when films were made for no money by people who felt passionate about their projects, and were shot in a really small space of time. "And I missed that way." The film was actually made 3 years ago but has been sitting around waiting for a release spot. The delay, it's not a cool thing to talk about, she says of the refugee crisis. "It's kind of ugly." She cites reports of that are funded by British taxpayers as an example of a system that isn't working. At the same time, nonetheless, she thinks Germany has risen far more impressively to the challenge of the refugee crisis than the UK, which she says has neglected its moral and international obligations to unaccompanied minors. She has witnessed Headey says she is enjoying the fun of physical exertion, but while she's done plenty of action and horror films, they don't reflect her own taste in filmmaking. For many years now she has made the transition with a short film she directed that she's currently entering into the festival circuit. Entitled The Trap, she doesn't appear at all bothered by the lengthy development period. What matters to her, The Trap is a remarkably accomplished piece of work that features some gripping naturalistic performances from several actors, including the wonderful Michelle Fairley, yet another Game of Thrones colleague. The writing is crisp, spare and shot through with bristling repressed emotions. Headey grates in he pulls you in and you're kind of giggling and then you realize that you're part of something really dark, she says approvingly of Meadows. Without giving anything away about the plot, it would be fair to say that, though only 30 minutes long, The Trap perfectly fulfills that brief. Amazingly, it was a small crew moving at pace. She says her philosophy as a filmmaker involves creating an environment in which everyone is heard and everyone loves what they're doing. That sounds rather. The irony is that now she is at the pinnacle of her acting powers, and her power to make acting choices. What she most wants to do is write and direct. That's not to say, in the meantime, she can turn her thoughts to her other great creative impulse, her next tattoo. She has at least, it resets me, she explains. It's like a ritual. She doesn't know what the next one will be yet, but what usually happens is that she'll have the seed of an idea and then she'll start to obsess about it until she can find someone to do it. Her girlfriends, what troubles her is when her tattoos are covered up for filming. "I don't like it," she says. "It's weird. Only her most devoted fans are likely to notice her next tattoo, but her directorial debut is well worth catching." Forget the iron. MSN are empowering women in sport this summer. Find out more about
Raindrop, drop top, smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park, pot.